Well, hi there. I'm Sandy Allnock, and I'm excited to bring you Watercolor Weekend here on the Ellen Hudson channel and over on my channel as well. So I will link you to some more video at the end here. I'm going to show you a little about how to make a palette out of your tube paints and create this little swatch card that's going to go inside this Schminky palette that I use, and it closes up really nicely. And we're going to do a project with some of these colors in just a few minutes, but I'm giving you a short preview of how I made my swatch card. There is a PDF over on my blog, and everything's linked over there from my YouTube channel with the full video showing you how to put all these paints together and a little more of that. The 18 colors in here, in addition to those 6 at the top that were already in here, the 6 at the top are the Daniel Smith Essentials, but the other 18 are my favorite 18 colors. Daniel Smith put together a dot card for me. I felt really honored by that. And they asked me to pick my favorite 18. It was like picking between children. So there's still more colors that I would prefer to have in here, but you gotta pick, right? But anyway, if you'd like to see how to put together this whole palette, then you can go over to my YouTube channel and make yourself one. But I'm going to paint trees now. That's going to be our project for today. I'm going to use these Altenew trees, 3 little mini sets, and a pretty pink posh fox. I'm going to stamp it in my Misty and get my trees all lined up, and the fox in the front, and then the trees are going to be behind the fox. So close it, pick it up, and I'm going to put the Versamark ink, or the VersaFine ink only on the fox. And then the rest of it I'm going to color with just a marker. You can use any water-based markers, the Art and Graphic Twins, the Distress markers, whatever water-based markers you want to use. And with the Misty, the cool thing is you can just keep stamping. You can add more color and stamp it again. You can do multiple colors and do some gray and some brown, kind of make a really nice tree trunk out of it. And now I'm zoomed in, and I kind of tried to do a split screen. The proportions are not exact between the two, so my hand will get giant over here on the right. But this is just going to be painting some trees, and I'm going to show you how easy they can be. I'm just doing blobs to start with. This is on Arches cold press paper, and I'm kind of just giving my first tree its shape. So picture what a tree might look like if it didn't have a bunch of forest around it. And then I'm going to lift up all that color. It's going to leave some moisture in the paper, and then with a little heavier pigment and not as much water in my brush, I'm dropping more paint in, more pigment, just kind of tapping it on the surface, and not everywhere, because I want to leave some of those very light lights right there and allow some of this color to be kind of toward the center. You can always dab off around the outside and lighten some stuff up. I'm using a little bit of water to soften some of those outside edges. I am also using, just because this will scare some people, I'm using a giant brush for this. I've now gotten to the point where I want to use more like a 10 or a 12, probably a 12, for a lot of my painting, even on cards. I know that seems like a giant brush, but these silver brushes do get really fine points on them. You can see the detail I can get, even though I'm using a big old hunkin' fat brush. This tree is going to be a little taller and skinnier, and the color I'm using this time is sap green. The other one was my green apatite green that's in the dot card. And I'm kind of making this tall, skinny one. I'm going to use the same procedure, but I wanted you to see what happens if you get too much water. See how goopy that is? You don't want quite that much water. That was too much for me. So I'm going to dab it off and go back in with a little less water and be able to do the same kind of a technique that I did on the other one. I want each tree to feel a little bit different from each other. So this helps to both change color and then make sure that maybe this one has a little more water in it. It'll be a little softer. And we'll see how that plays out by the time it's all said and done. I'm going to mix in a little lemon yellow now, because you can mix your own greens. I like to have a couple greens in my palette because that gives me a start, and then I can just push them a little bit differently. So this one I could push a little bit yellow by just adding a little to it. And you'll notice that a little bit of that tree trunk is softening up, and it's kind of mushing a little bit into the tree, which is good because that's water-based ink in the Zig marker that I used there. I decided instead of just having 3 trees off to the side, I'd put one more tree behind my fox, and it's going to be a lighter tree. And there's no no tree trunk since it's behind the fox. And since I have paint on my brush, I'm going to add a little bit down here on the bottom to create some ground under my trees. And I'm kind of pulling some color off with my brush so that it's very light at the bottom, and then I'll drop some heavier color right in that top. On that right side, it just looked a little funky, so I'll do a little work to try to soften that up, and it won't have a hard edge over there. And now I'm going to mix up a little bit more pigmented type of mix of paint. You see I'm getting a darker color there. The paint is still wet. This is all done in one fell swoop. I didn't do much editing here. So the paint is all still, it's still got some of that moisture in it, so the color's still going to move. And I have the ability to push it around too if I want to. Depending on how quickly you paint, you may want to paint one tree and then paint another tree, but they will start to do the things trees do when you have a whole row of them. They kind of blend together when they meet. So if you did one tree and then painted a whole nother tree, you would have a little more of a hard line, or at least it would be difficult to make that fuzziness between the two trees. So when I was at CHA this year, I did a demo of this at the Daniel Smith booth. And I was really delightfully surprised to see how many people were able to paint trees on their first go round. So this is not hard. Encourage you to try it. You can also try it with fall colors. Wouldn't that be beautiful to just do a whole row of fall trees? And I just got hooked on this, and I just sat and painted a whole bunch of trees. So it's really relaxing, and it's a fun way to just watch the paint move. And you can see I've got some edges that are really soft where the trees are sort of blending together. You can create all different sort of looks for trees. Some, if you look out at a row of trees, some will have more white highlights in them. Some will have a little more bluish, some will have a little more yellowish. And you can just play around with that and use the colors that you have and mix them all up to try to create different colors for your tree line. So I'm trying to get some color all the way around this fox because I wanted him to really feel like he's part of the scene. If I had stopped the trees over just on the left, it wouldn't have felt like he was part of it, like he's just sitting off, off on the side, oddly. So I'm tapping in more dark color now into my very yellow trees because they needed just a little more definition. They turned into yellow-green blobs, which will happen a little more as, you know, the paint is wetter in those because the mix that I used was wetter. And now I'm taking some water and just going over top of those tree trunks because remember they were in the water-based ink. So when I add water to them now, they're sort of becoming part of the painting instead of just being stamped on there. It's one reason why I made sure that those were stamped in the water-based ink. If I had stamped the fox in that, then he would totally mush out. And I wanted him to kind of be sharp in the foreground. So that's why he's stamped in a waterproof ink. In addition to the VersaFine, by the way, you can also use Ranger Jet Black Archival. That's another one that I use a lot for watercolor. So mixing up a little bit more, trying to fill in some of these areas where my trees were fading. And I can feel my mind reeling, like, what am I going to do next? Am I going to add more green? Am I going to? And yes, I decided to add more green, add more dark to the very darkest parts of the trees down at the bottom. Because as the paint dries, it's going to keep lightening. So if you want some contrast, you'll just keep adding color. And I wanted to add it while it was wet, so I didn't want to wait completely till it was dry. So I was kind of watching it as I went. And I'm sitting here as I do the voiceover. I don't know if you guys have any idea how videos are made, but for this particular one, I had recorded the painting of this several weeks ago. So I'm trying to remember what I was thinking when I did this. So that is why I'm entertained by my own decision to add more dark color to it. But the trees are looking good. I'm pretty well settled with where they are, and I wanted to start painting my fox, but I didn't want him to start bleeding into the trees, so I dried it a little bit with my heat gun, my heat tool, and then I'll just paint a couple colors for the fox. Now foxes can be orange, they can be brown. I'm going to start with, you know, a little bit of a goldish color and that sort of thing, spread the color around and then drop other colors into it. The colors in my palette are ones that are really good, I think, for crafters because there's a really good range of all different kinds of colors for things like animals and some people colors and that sort of thing. A lot of it will be colors you'll need to mix. So if you decide you're just going to follow the colors that Sandy uses, beware. There's some of these I picked because I know I'm going to need to mix them to create skin tones and that sort of thing, but they're colors that I know I can work with. So over on my channel, as I've been doing videos lately and will be continuing, I'm going to try to focus on using my dot card colors as much as possible. So if you get them, you'll have some instruction if you follow me over there as we go. So you'll notice that a lot of the colors I've been using lately happen to be the ones that are in this palette. So the other thing about the dot card is that there are some available. There are, I don't remember exactly how many, but for a limited time, if you order any of the Daniel Smith watercolor products, you can get that dot card for free. So while supplies last, and you want to make sure you do it quickly. So if you need some paint colors or some masking fluid or something, any of the grounds, whatever, you're welcome to get that and then try out some of the colors in my dot card. The way I use a dot card, it's just basically a little card with dots of paint on it. It's actually live paint, so you can just take a brush, touch it to it, and try it. And that way you can see whether or not that's a color you want to get for your palette, for your collection, or if you're like, no, Sandy's crazy, I don't like that color. Because we all have different tastes. We have different things we like, different colors we use most often, which also means we'll need different colors to mix with. But I do very naturalistic things, so a lot of my colors lean toward that much more than other colors. So here's the finished card. I popped up the watercolor panel onto some dimensional adhesive on a black piece of border paper underneath and added a little sentiment. Very cool. And then I decided I would paint a lot of trees. I told you I got hooked on trees, right? And look at all these different color combinations you can get. These are all colors that are in my dot card too. Thanks for joining me for Watercolor Weekend. And if you would like to see more on this palette, it's a little slower and a little less jumpy over on my channel. And there is a link to it right there on the screen as well as in the doobly-doo down below. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.